Thank you for joining us today for the visioning presentation of St. Timothy's Lutheran Church, the 5-year plan. Please take a moment to brainstorm some of the marks of a thriving church. When you walk into a building or look at the ministries that the church offers, that a congregation offers, what are some of the things that you look at and say, hey, this place is really thriving? In the book Simple Church, Tom Rainer and Eric Geiger identify 4 marks of a thriving congregation. Now, their research has shown them that there is less than a 1% difference among congregations that are considered to be thriving, and all these congregations show these 4 marks. The first one is clarity. The second, movement. The third, alignment. And the fourth, focus. Clarity is about a congregation's ability to articulate who they are and what they're about. Now, currently, St. Timothy's is engaged in a variety of ministries, a variety of very different ministries. And for many of these ministries, the bridge between what we are doing and our main activity, which is worship, is either very strained or non-existent. Here you can see that we have our main activity, which is worship, and there are a few things like choir, confirmation, joint services with churches in Evanston, and the interfaith services in Skokie that are all things we do that are connected with our main activity. When you get a little further out, in Evanston, we have, through those congregations and the Interfaith Action of Evanston group, the Sack Lunch ministry that we do. Within Skokie, we're connected with the Niles Township Clergy Forum, and Insight Church is a part of that, and we've engaged in the Interfaith Thanksgiving Eve service with this group. We've also had joint activities such as Trunk or Treat. That's way out here. That we've done that really are distantly connected to our main activity of worship. And then we have a number of groups and activities that take place within our building or use our building that really aren't connected with worship at all. We believe in their ministries and what they're doing, but there is not a real bridge here between things like the daycare or the coffee house or the dancing ministries or even the game night. There's not a bridge between that and the main activity of our congregation. Those congregations that look at clarity are looking at what holds everything together. And congregations that don't have clarity risk burning out because they're pulled in too many competing directions. Thriving congregations have a clear identity, and they're able to talk about their mission with ease. The second mark of a thriving congregation is movement. Movement is about process, how people move from the community into worship. And I think we need to go one step further to look at how we send people back out from worship into the community. The goal of our ministry is to help others discover God's gifts for them in Christ through word and sacraments. And you can see here how something like a liturgical dance group might help build a bridge between the dancing ministries we currently host and our main activity, which is worship. Congregations that are paying attention to movement are looking at intentional ways to connect people from the community to the main activity. Congregations that aren't intentional about movement lose people in the transition. Ultimately, we want to create a sustainable cycle where our ministries lead into our main activity and our main activity leads back out into our ministries. Thriving congregations believe that the gospel is good news, and they provide clear paths for others to experience the good news. The third mark of a thriving congregation is alignment. Alignment is about how staff, people, and resources help with the process. Congregations that are working that don't have alignment risk burnout and confusion and stagnation, because the staff and the ministries in the congregation are all competing with one another for time and resources. It's important that everyone is working together to accomplish a clearly stated common goal. Thriving congregations are intentional about creating a culture of cooperation, not competition. The fourth mark of a thriving congregation is focus. Focus is about keeping the main thing the main thing. Who we are and what we do and how we do it is always center stage. Congregations that don't have focus ask too much of their members, and they risk stagnation and ultimately death. Focus is looking at how we put a diversity of spiritual gifts to work for Jesus' mission. In order to keep things fresh, every project needs a clear and measurable goal with definite start and end dates. The quickest way to kill enthusiasm, energy, and ministry is to keep perpetuating something that no longer has any interest behind it or any enthusiasm behind it. Thriving congregations expand on the one ministry that they do exceptionally well. The church council sat down and brainstormed to see if they could get down to the one ministry that could be a focus for building off of at St. Timothy's. The council looked at a variety of different aspects, but ultimately discerned that feeding ministry has the greatest energy, or creates the greatest energy within the congregation and the most excitement. So the council recommends that St. Timothy's pursue social justice ministry with an emphasis on feeding. Feeding ministry energizes us as a congregation. 48% of our active members are mobilized currently around our sack lunch ministry. This is unheard of. Most congregations can't boast of one ministry that mobilizes almost half of their active members. When something this unusual happens, we have to pay attention. Our community has clear feeding goals. Paul Luke and I sat down with Maureen Murphy, the Director of Human Services in Skokie, before Christmas, and as we talked about ways St. Timothy's could get involved in the community, she identified two that particularly dealt with feeding. The first was Meals on Wheels, where people carry food or do grocery shopping for those who can't cook for themselves or can't shop for themselves. The second was planting a community garden. Food is a universal language. It brings people together. It helps people experience diverse cultures. This is most apparent in Skokie at the farmers market and at the Festival of Cultures, where people come together and learn about each other by sharing food. There is a clear connection with our worship life. There's a clear connection between communion and God's sustaining goodness in the community. Feeding ministry at St. Timothy's has demonstrated long-term sustainability. Sack Lunch ministry has been going on for nearly a decade, and it's still going strong. This ministry has been supported by Dance for Health, special offerings, and the occasional grant. It has been expanded before through the Reverse Advent calendar, through Valerie's Garden, and through clothing drives. Ultimately, when the council is looking at expanding St. Timothy's ministries along the lines of a feeding ministry, they're looking at making something this congregation does really, really well even better. The council has identified 4 stages of development for a feeding ministry. The first stage is to adopt a mission statement. The council crafted a mission statement, and it was adopted on Sunday, January 29th at the congregation's annual meeting. The second stage is to identify feeding ministry opportunities in the surrounding community. The third stage is to expand and align ministries to better serve our neighbors' needs. And the fourth stage is to adopt new or fresh ministries to replace stale ministries. Stages 2 through 4 are an ongoing process, and healthy congregations continue to revisit their effectiveness in meeting the changing needs of the community. So the first stage of development is to adopt a mission statement. St. Timothy's mission statement is sharing the bread of life. This mission statement was adopted at the congregation's annual meeting. It's easy to remember. It clearly states who we are and what we're about. The council believes that Jesus is calling us to share the bread of life. Ultimately, this mission statement will shape our life together and our way of reaching out to the community. The second stage of development is to identify feeding ministry opportunities in the surrounding community. We know who we are. We know what we're about. How are we sharing the bread of life? We need to find ways of helping facilitate the movement between God's sustaining goodness in the community to God's sustaining goodness at the table. We need to look at ways of linking current feeding ministries to worship and to the community and strengthening those ties. We need to build bridges between the community and worship through feeding. The third stage of development is to expand and align ministries to better serve our neighbors' needs. We know who we are. We know what we're about. We know how we're sharing the bread of life. Now we need to unite ministry leaders and resources for the mission. We will be working together to live out Christ's mission for us, sharing the bread of life. And by uniting around that mission, we turn competition into cooperation. The fourth stage of development is to adopt new ministries, fresh ministries, that replace stale ministries. Fresh ministries need to help us share the bread of life in better and different ways. Stale ministries without end burden congregations and drain energy and resources, ultimately making the congregation ineffective in accomplishing their mission. New ministries with clear goals and definitive end dates will keep things fresh by creating a cooperative culture of creativity and openness. So, what could St. Timothy's look like in 5 years? That would be 2021. What if we had dinner discussion groups, safe places where diverse groups of people could gather and talk about things that actually mattered? What if St. Timothy's got involved with hunger-related advocacy, calling for social accountability around basic needs at a village, township, state, and federal level? What if St. Timothy's planted a community garden and made room for neighbors to come and to plant crops and then offered clear places where those crops could be distributed in the community? What if St. Timothy's got involved with Meals on Wheels and helped feed homebound seniors who couldn't shop or cook for themselves? What if St. Timothy's provided materials or hosted groups that promoted a healthy relationship with food, providing healing for those who are struggling with dietary restrictions or weight loss? What if St. Timothy's adopted the practice of the love feast, an ancient Christian tradition of worshiping around a full meal? In the Gospel of John, Jesus sends Peter out, telling him to feed his sheep. This is the ministry that the council believes Jesus is calling us to as a congregation. Jesus is calling us to share the bread of life.